I met Naomi in line for coffee, of all places. Not at a party, not through friends, just a random Wednesday morning when we both happened to reach for the same cup from the pickup counter at the same time. She laughed first, apologizing in this soft, easy voice. I remember smiling and saying, if it's a caramel latte, it's probably mine. It wasn't. It was hers. But she handed it over anyway, told me I could have it if I was charming enough to convince her. I ended up buying her another and asking her to sit with me. There wasn't a grand moment that followed. No sparks flying, no dramatic conversations. We just talked. About work, about family, about how her job in urban planning was more chaotic than people realized. She was calm and quick-witted, the kind of person who didn't seem to force anything. I liked that. We started dating a few weeks later. It was easy from the beginning. I'd been in a few serious relationships before, but they always felt like something I had to work to keep level. With Naomi, things just moved on their own. She didn't play games. She was steady, thoughtful, and unafraid to speak plainly. We clicked in a way I hadn't realized I was missing. A year later, we moved in together. 2 years after that, we got married in a modest ceremony at a vineyard just outside the city. My mom cried more than I expected. Naomi's mom gave her a necklace from her grandmother. It was a quiet, sincere day. No drama. Just people who loved us, celebrating something that already felt settled. Not long after the wedding, we had our first child, a boy we named Miles. 2 years later, our daughter, Lily, followed. They're 6 and 4 now. Smart, loud, full of energy. They filled the space in our lives in a way I didn't even know was possible. Everything got a little messier, a little noisier, but also more vivid. Naomi was a natural with them, patient and quick-thinking. She handled tantrums better than I did. I liked watching her be a mom. She made it look easy, even when it clearly wasn't. Naomi got along well with my mom. That meant a lot to me. My biological dad wasn't in the picture, hadn't been since I was 3. But I grew up with my stepfather, Alan, who married my mom when I was 6. He raised me like his own. Never made me feel like I was borrowing space in his life. He came to every game, every school event, taught me how to drive, how to stand up for myself, how to manage my money. The usual dad stuff, but done right. Alan and Naomi always got along. They'd talk about books or music or cooking. He had a dry sense of humor that she appreciated, and she had this way of drawing people into conversation without trying too hard. Watching them laugh at something during family dinners was a regular, comfortable thing. It made holidays smoother, less formal. Our life wasn't flashy. It was stable, real, ours. And at the time, I couldn't ask for more. Our weekdays had a rhythm. Not perfect, no family with 2 young kids runs on exact timing, but it was ours. I'd usually be up before the rest of the house, shaving quietly in the bathroom while Miles and Lily were still tangled in their bedsheets. Naomi handled breakfast most days, waffles or oatmeal, depending on how patient she felt. She was better at mornings than I was. I made up for it with school drop-offs, bundling the kids into the car while she reviewed her calendar at the kitchen table. I worked for a logistics firm, mostly from home since the pandemic. It stuck even after offices reopened. The company realized it saved money, and honestly, I was grateful. I liked being around. I liked hearing the background noise of my family moving through the day. Naomi had shifted to part-time consulting after Lily was born, which gave her more flexibility. She took on a few urban planning projects every quarter, worked from the guest room we converted into an office, and occasionally traveled for city council meetings in neighboring towns. Weekends were reserved. Sometimes we took the kids to the park, or to Naomi's mother's place for lunch. Other times, we stayed in pajamas until noon, watching animated movies we knew by heart. We weren't big on babysitters, not out of principle, just preference. We liked being with the kids. We liked each other. Alan and my mom would visit at least once a month, sometimes more. They were both retired now, my mom from teaching, Alan from property management, and they liked to show up with groceries, help wrangle the kids, and insist they weren't tired even when I could see it in their posture. Alan had a quiet bond with Miles. They'd sit in the backyard with toy trucks or building sets, Alan narrating in a mock-serious voice while Miles gave him instructions. It meant a lot to me, watching that. I hadn't had a dad when I was little. Not really. So seeing Alan be that for my son, it felt like some kind of full-circle moment. I told him that once. He just nodded and said, "That's what family is. We fill in the spaces." Naomi always seemed to appreciate him, too. She'd help my mom in the kitchen, ask Alan about his latest book or what he thought of some local zoning issue. They had good conversation chemistry, if that makes sense. Not flirty, just familiar. I liked that she got along with them. It made things easy. We weren't flashy. We didn't post vacation reels or do coordinated family costumes. But we had a steady thing. Miles was reading ahead of his grade. Lily was still obsessed with dinosaurs. Naomi still fell asleep most nights halfway through whatever show we were watching. I'd carry her to bed, tuck her in, brush her hair back, and think, not for the first time, that I was lucky. Sometimes I'd wonder if other families felt this settled. Not perfect, but stable. Like nothing could knock it off track. One of my favorite parts of the week was Friday night. We didn't go out. We didn't host dinner parties or plan anything big. It was just our family tradition, pizza, a blanket fort in the living room, and whatever movie Miles and Lily could agree on. Naomi would light a few candles like we were setting a mood, even if we were watching a cartoon for the 10th time. We let the kids eat on the floor while we shared the couch, and somehow, it always felt like a reset button after the chaos of the week. Naomi liked the slow parts of life. She wasn't someone who needed noise. She was good at making silence feel like company, not absence. When the kids were down for the night, we'd often just sit near each other, her curled up reading, me checking scores on my phone, not speaking much, but still connected. That kind of comfort doesn't come easy. I'd had relationships where quiet meant distance. With Naomi, it was just stillness. And it worked. We talked a lot about the future. Schools, vacations, how we might move in a few years once the kids were older and didn't need a backyard quite so much. Naomi liked the idea of living closer to the city center, she missed the walkability. I was more reluctant to give up the quiet of our block. But we always agreed that wherever we ended up, it had to work for the kids first. She was the one who kept us moving, doctor's appointments, playdates, new shoes when feet grew faster than we expected. I took care of logistics, finances, groceries, maintenance. We balanced. That was the word I kept coming back to when people asked how married life was. Balanced. Not always exciting, not without stress, but equal. Steady. Fair. We made a good team at family gatherings, too. Thanksgiving was always at my mom and Alan's house. Naomi brought desserts, she made a ridiculously good pecan pie, and I carved the turkey like my stepdad had taught me. Alan and Naomi always ended up talking at the kitchen island while the rest of us did dishes or herded kids around. I never thought much of it. He liked having adult conversations outside of small talk. She was one of the few people who could match him in that quiet, curious way. It was comforting, seeing them connect. It made holidays feel less divided. Miles called Alan Gramp, and Lily had started calling him Pop. He ate it up. Bought them books and puzzles, let them jump all over him even when his back clearly wasn't up for it. Naomi once joked that the kids liked him more than us. He shrugged and said, "That's how you know I'm doing it right." When we stayed over, which we did a few times a year, the kids slept in the guest room beside ours, and Naomi always brought too much stuff. Pillows, sound machines, the kids' favorite mugs. It felt like effort, but not chore-like. She wanted us to feel at home. And we did. That's what I remember most about those weekends. They felt like family. Not staged. Not tense. Just easy. That fall, things felt unusually smooth. The kids had both adjusted to school well. Lily started preschool 3 mornings a week, and Miles had gotten comfortable in first grade. Naomi and I had fallen into a routine that felt almost effortless. There were still the usual kid meltdowns, forgotten lunchboxes, and late-night wake-ups from bad dreams, but we handled them like a team. We'd grown into the kind of couple that didn't have to discuss everything anymore. If I noticed she was tired, I'd take over bedtime. If I was stuck on a work call, she'd grab the kids from school without needing to ask. We didn't keep score, at least, not consciously. I think we both just wanted things to stay level, and for the most part, they did. That October, we took the kids to the pumpkin patch outside of town. It had become a yearly tradition. Naomi wore this chunky gray sweater I always liked, and she spent half the time taking photos of the kids climbing hay bales or struggling to lift pumpkins way too big for them. We stopped at a cider stand, let the kids pick out mini donuts, and somehow ended up buying 3 pumpkins we didn't need. On the drive home, Lily fell asleep mid-bite into a caramel apple, and Naomi turned to me with a grin and whispered, "We're gonna pay for that sugar crash later." But we didn't. The kids were weirdly mellow that night, and Naomi and I ended up curled on the couch watching a movie while the house finally fell quiet. She leaned into me, her feet tucked under a throw blanket, and for a while, neither of us said anything. I remember thinking how rare those moments had become, not because we didn't try, but because there was always something to do. I started keeping track of those quiet pauses. Not intentionally, but almost as a way to remind myself what made it all feel worth it. Naomi brushing Lily's hair on the porch steps. Miles leaning against her during story time. A look across the kitchen while we loaded the dishwasher. Nothing flashy, just the small pieces that added up to something solid. Alan came by more often that season. He'd take the kids to the library on Saturdays, or pick them up from school if Naomi and I were both tied up. He never overstepped, he always asked first. But I could tell he loved it. I never saw him as a lonely man, but retirement had slowed him down more than he liked to admit. Being with the kids seemed to energize him. And Naomi never minded. She said it was good for the kids to have another adult around who wasn't burned out by parenting. I'd watch them talk sometimes, Naomi and Alan, and think how grateful I was that they got along. Not everyone has that. In-laws are tricky for some people, but not for us. He respected her. She respected him. That was that. Looking back, I wonder if I missed anything in those days. A gesture, a glance, a word that landed oddly. But at the time, I didn't look for cracks. I didn't need to. Nothing felt out of place. Everything we had seemed to fit. It happened during a visit to my mom and Alan's place in early December. The kids were out of school for a long weekend, and we thought it would be good to get out of the house for a few days. Naomi liked staying there, she said it felt like a proper retreat, even if it was just an hour away. My mom made a big fuss, as always, and Alan insisted on cooking the first night. He made his lemon chicken, the one Naomi always complimented. It was the kind of evening we'd had a dozen times. The kids played with blocks on the rug in front of the fireplace. My mom was telling Naomi about a Christmas market she wanted to visit. Alan poured everyone wine. I sat back, just watching it all. Content. At some point, I got up to get more napkins from the kitchen. When I came back, Naomi and Alan were laughing about something, I couldn't hear what, just the tail end of it. Her hand was resting on the back of his chair. Not for long. Just a second too long. I didn't think anything of it at first. Not really. But the image stuck in my head later that night. It wasn't the gesture itself. It was how easily it had disappeared, how casual it had seemed. But once I thought about it, I realized I couldn't remember ever seeing her do that before. Not with him. Not with anyone, really. I told myself I was tired. I hadn't been sleeping well that week, too much work on my plate, and the kids had both come down with colds earlier in the month. Everything felt a little frayed. I brushed it off. But the next day, something else lingered. After breakfast, we all went for a walk through the neighborhood. The kids ran ahead, bundled in hats and puffy coats. Naomi and I walked beside each other, holding hands. Alan walked just behind us. At one point, Naomi let go of my hand to adjust Lily's scarf, and when she stood back up, Alan made a comment I didn't catch, something that made her laugh a little too quickly, like she didn't want it to be noticed. Maybe I was overthinking it. But for the first time, I started to feel something off. Not tension. Not even suspicion, really. Just a sense that something had shifted slightly, like a painting hung just a degree off-center. Later that night, when the kids were asleep, Naomi and I sat on the couch with my mom and Alan. My mom was half dozing, and the fire had gone low. Naomi got up to get tea. Alan followed her to the kitchen a minute later, saying he'd help. I stayed on the couch, listening absently to the sounds of cups and cabinet doors. Nothing strange. Nothing inappropriate. They came back a few minutes later, mugs in hand. But I'd noticed that she didn't look at me when she sat back down. It was small. Probably nothing. Still, I didn't forget it. And that was new. The rest of that weekend passed without anything obvious. We went through the usual routines, breakfast together, time outside with the kids, board games in the living room. Naomi was her usual self. She smiled, helped my mom with the dishes, read stories to Lily at night, and kissed me on the cheek when I made her coffee. Nothing anyone else would have found strange. But something sat differently in me now. Like a thread had been pulled somewhere and I couldn't figure out which one. It wasn't Naomi's behavior, exactly. It was the moments in between. Pauses that hadn't been there before. Gaps in conversation that felt new. She seemed a little less present. She'd trail off in the middle of sentences or go quiet when the room got noisy. I chalked it up to fatigue. The kids were up early every day, and these family visits, while warm, were still a little exhausting. Still, I caught myself watching her more closely than usual. Not with suspicion. More with curiosity. Like I was trying to confirm that things still looked like they always had. On Sunday, just before we were supposed to leave, Naomi asked if we could stay one more night. "It's cozy here," she said, already putting the kettle on. "And the kids are happy. It's nice to have help." I didn't disagree. The house had its own calm. My mom was always happy to keep us longer, and Alan had already offered to make another dinner. There was no reason to say no. But I noticed, when Naomi asked, that she didn't look at me. She was speaking while arranging mugs in a row, her focus somewhere else. That night, Naomi went to bed early. She said she had a headache. I stayed up with my mom for a bit, watching an old movie on low volume while she dozed off in her chair. Alan had gone upstairs to check on something, and I sat there in the quiet, thinking about how normal everything was. Too normal, maybe. I eventually got up and checked in on the kids. Miles had kicked his blanket off again. Lily was talking in her sleep. I adjusted both of them, then stood for a long minute in the hallway, listening to the creaks of the house settle. When I went back to our guest room, Naomi was already asleep. Or at least pretending to be. Her back was to me, her breathing even, her body still. I got in quietly. Didn't touch her. Didn't say anything. I just lay there, wide awake, staring at the ceiling. It was nothing. There was no reason to feel distant. But I did. The next morning, Naomi was cheerful again. She made breakfast with my mom, chased Lily around the kitchen, took pictures of Alan and Miles building a birdhouse in the backyard. She kissed me before we left and held my hand in the car. But for every sweet, familiar gesture, I found myself wondering what had changed. It was like I was standing outside the glass of my own life, watching it unfold from just a step too far away. And I didn't know how long I'd been out there. When we got back home, things settled back into their usual pace, on the surface. The school drop-offs, the emails, the noise of toys left in the hallway. From the outside, everything resumed without interruption. But inside, I kept thinking about that weekend. Not in full memories, just flashes. A touch. A glance. A laugh that lingered too long. Moments that hadn't felt wrong at the time but now wouldn't leave my mind. I didn't say anything. I didn't bring it up. Not to Naomi, not to anyone. I couldn't explain it, even to myself. There was no accusation. Just a weight I couldn't shake. She started going to bed early more often. Said she was tired, and she looked it, dark circles under her eyes, a quiet stretch in the evenings that used to be ours. I didn't push. I figured maybe it was just a phase. The season. The kids. Work. Any number of normal reasons. But it wasn't just the early nights. It was the distance I felt even when she was sitting beside me. We'd be watching something together, and I'd glance over and realize she wasn't paying attention. Her eyes would be on the screen, but unfocused. Or she'd pick up her phone, scroll idly, set it down again without saying a word. One night, I asked her if everything was okay. She smiled, quickly, automatically. Of course, she said. Just tired. Why? I told her she seemed a little off. She leaned in and kissed me then, as if to prove the point. But it felt like punctuation. Like closing a conversation, not starting one. I started noticing things. Small things. She left her phone face down more often, even when it buzzed. She turned off her notifications for some apps. Said it helped her focus. That made sense. It wasn't like I snooped. I wasn't the paranoid type. I never had reason to be. We trusted each other. That had always been the foundation. Still, I started staying up a bit later. After she went to bed, I'd sit in the living room with the lights low, just thinking. Not accusing her in my head. Just observing. Replaying moments. Trying to understand if something had changed, or if I'd simply never been paying close enough attention to begin with. The kids were oblivious. Lily still ran to Naomi first when she fell. Miles still asked her to help with homework. The family unit held its shape. But when Naomi kissed me goodbye in the mornings, there was something else in her eyes. Not guilt. Not exactly distance either. Something I couldn't name. Like her mind was already elsewhere. Alan texted me midweek asking if we'd made plans for Christmas. I said we'd talk about it. Naomi, when I brought it up, was eager to go. It'll be good for the kids, she said. They've been asking about Gramp and Grandma. And just like that, the plan was set. A week before Christmas, back at my mother's house. Another weekend of food and stories and family. Another chance, I thought, to reset whatever had gone sideways. If anything had. Because that was still the hardest part. Nothing had actually happened. Not that I could prove. But the feeling hadn't gone away. And I was starting to realize it wasn't going to. We arrived at my mom and Alan's house the Saturday before Christmas. Snow had fallen the night before, just enough to make the yard look like something out of a postcard. The kids were thrilled. Naomi helped them out of their coats while I carried the bags inside, and my mom greeted us with hot cider and that same tight hug she always gave, the one that made me feel 12 again. Everything felt familiar. The smell of the fireplace, the soft hum of the dishwasher running, the sound of Alan's boots on the hardwood. He gave me a firm clap on the shoulder and said, "Glad you made it," like we hadn't seen each other 2 weeks earlier. We settled in quickly. Naomi seemed relaxed, cheerful, even. She and my mom talked in the kitchen, peeling apples for the pie while the kids ran up and down the hallway. Alan offered to help me bring in firewood from the shed, and we made small talk about the holidays, work, whether we'd get more snow. The first half of the day passed like it always did, comfortably. But something still sat in my chest. A tightness. A voice I kept silencing. That night, after dinner, my mom went to bed early with a headache. The kids were tucked in down the hall, half asleep by the time Naomi finished reading to them. I stayed behind in the living room, half watching a basketball game on mute. Naomi had disappeared for a while. I figured she was upstairs in our room or brushing her teeth in the hall bathroom. The house was quiet. Almost too quiet. The kind where even soft footsteps echo. I got up to check on the kids one more time, walking past the staircase toward the hallway. But something made me stop. Voices. Muffled. Not angry. Not loud. But close. Too close. I moved up the stairs slowly, avoiding the creaky step near the middle. At the top, I paused. The door to the guest bedroom, the one Alan always used when we had extra family staying over, was barely open. I didn't mean to look. I told myself I wouldn't. But I did. She was sitting on the edge of the bed. Shirt off. Alan was in front of her. Shirtless. Close. Too close. I didn't step inside. I didn't speak. I just stood there. My hand against the doorframe. My pulse roaring in my ears. Naomi turned first. Her face collapsed into something between shock and dread. Alan didn't flinch. He just looked at me, like he'd been caught sneaking out the back door of a burning building. I didn't move. I didn't yell. I just stared for a few seconds longer, turned around, and walked back down the stairs without a sound. My hands shook, but only a little. My mouth felt dry. My thoughts were too calm. I sat in the kitchen, stared at the dark window, and waited for someone to come downstairs. No one did. They didn't need to. I'd seen enough. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the kitchen in the dark, the house silent above me. At one point, I heard footsteps, someone moving down the hallway, but they never came downstairs. Maybe they thought I'd left. Maybe they were waiting me out. Cowards, both of them. By morning, I'd already made up my mind. Naomi came down first, hair pulled back, face pale. She didn't speak right away. I didn't look up from my phone. She stood in front of the table for a few seconds, probably waiting for me to say something, shout, cry, break something. But I had nothing to give her. Finally she said, "Can we talk?" I stood up, stepped past her without making contact, and walked into the guest room where Alan had just finished pulling on a sweater. He turned when he saw me. Said my name like we were still family. I punched him. Once. Square in the jaw. He dropped against the dresser, groaned, didn't even try to defend himself. I didn't hit him again. I wasn't going to give him more than that. Naomi came running in after she heard it. I didn't wait around for her reaction. I walked out, pulled out my phone, and called a divorce attorney. We left within the hour. I didn't let Naomi ride in the same car. I packed the kids into the back seat of mine, buckled them in, told them we'd forgotten something at home. They didn't question it. I didn't say a word to Naomi on the way out. She stood on the front step, holding her coat, her face stiff with whatever lies she was scrambling to come up with. It didn't matter anymore. Back home, I moved fast. Changed the locks. Froze the joint accounts. Called my mother. That conversation was worse than anything. She didn't speak for several seconds after I told her. Then she just said, "I see." Her voice was flatter than I'd ever heard it. She filed for divorce within 48 hours. Alan left the house the same day she told him. She didn't ask me for details. Didn't want to know how far it had gone. She just said, he doesn't come back from something like that. Not in my house. She took him to court within the week, citing emotional distress and breach of trust. Her lawyer requested significant moral compensation. From what I hear, Alan didn't fight it. He moved into a rental across town and stopped showing up to family events. No one asked where he went. Naomi tried to reach me. Emails. Texts. Voicemails full of apologies and excuses. I didn't open a single one. On Christmas morning, the kids woke up to a quiet living room. No tree lights. No stockings. Just me, sitting on the couch, waiting to explain why their mom wasn't going to be home. I kept it simple. Age appropriate. And then I sent Naomi one final message. Your gift this year is official notice. You've been removed from every right you once had to raise them. It wasn't just rage. It was protection. I filed for full custody. And I made sure the court saw exactly who she was. After the papers were filed, the silence came next. Naomi left the city. I didn't know where at first. She stopped calling, stopped trying to see the kids. I think she understood that the damage wasn't something she could fix with words. The court moved faster than expected, maybe because I didn't drag it out. I showed them what they needed to see, timelines, dates, testimonies. My mother added her own statement, and between the two of us, there wasn't much left standing. I was granted full custody before the new year. The kids didn't ask about her much. Lily mentioned her once while brushing her teeth, asking why mommy wasn't helping with pajamas anymore. I told her mommy was staying somewhere else. That seemed enough for now. Miles, older, just nodded when I told him. I think he knew more than he let on. Kids always know. Alan's name disappeared from family conversations. My mother didn't speak it. Not in anger, just erasure. She moved his things out of the house without ceremony. Donated most of them. Burned a few. She told me once, without looking up from her tea, you know what hurts the most? That he looked you in the eye afterward. Like nothing had changed. People started hearing about it, quietly, then more openly. A few mutual friends reached out. No one defended Naomi. They didn't need to. She'd removed herself. A few of her old coworkers emailed to check in. They'd heard about what happened. One told me she hadn't shown up to a job interview she'd scheduled in early January. Alan's reputation never fully recovered. He kept his head down, stopped attending community meetings, declined every family invite. Even his brother told my mom, we didn't expect that from him. And we don't know what to do with it now. There were moments, brief ones, when I found myself trying to make sense of it. What conversation had started it? Who crossed the line first? But none of it mattered. The betrayal was done. Trying to trace it backward was like reaching into smoke. I focused on rebuilding. On normalcy. The kids and I made routines. Pancake Saturdays. Library runs. I put their drawings on the fridge and taught Miles how to ride his bike without training wheels. Lily sang constantly, off-key, joyful, loud. I let her. The house didn't feel empty. It felt clean. My mother came over every Sunday for dinner. She never asked questions. Never offered advice. She just brought pies or vegetables and helped set the table. We'd watch the kids eat and sometimes talk about anything but what had happened. Other times, we'd say nothing at all. I never tried to replace anything. Not the marriage. Not the stepfather I used to respect. I wasn't interested in restoring a life that had already shown me what was hiding inside it. What I built now would be smaller, but it would be honest. And for the first time in months, I started sleeping through the night again. Spring came earlier than expected that year. The snow melted in March, and by April the backyard was soft with new grass. The kids started spending more time outside again, chalk drawings on the patio, tiny muddy footprints leading back to the kitchen. I let them make a mess. I didn't care. One evening, after they'd fallen asleep, I sat alone in the backyard with a blanket over my lap and a warm cup of coffee cooling in my hands. There wasn't anything in particular on my mind. No storm of thoughts, no quiet rage. Just stillness. The kind you don't even notice you're missing until it's back. I'd spent so long trying to understand how it happened, how someone I trusted so fully could cross a line I didn't even know needed guarding. But I realized I didn't need an answer anymore. I didn't care what the moment looked like when it began. I only cared about the moment I stepped away from it for good. Naomi never asked for a second chance. I think she knew it was gone before she could try. Her last message, weeks after the court decision, was a short email. No excuses. Just, I'm sorry for what I ruined. I miss them. And I miss you. But I understand why you won't reply. I didn't. Alan never tried to see me again. I wouldn't have let him. My mom, quiet as ever, picked up the pieces in her own way. She volunteered more, joined a community garden, started going to events again. We didn't talk about him. Not out of avoidance, just because there was nothing left to say. When someone shows you who they are, and who they're willing to betray, you stop trying to explain it. You just move forward. There were days when I'd look around and realize how far we'd come. Not dramatically, just step by step. A bedtime story, a scraped knee patched up without calling Naomi. A school play I attended solo, waving as Lily looked into the crowd and smiled just at me. I was all they needed. And somehow, I'd become all I needed too. The life I'd built with Naomi had ended in the ugliest way. But the life I had now was something else entirely. It was smaller, yes. Quieter. But it was mine. Built without secrets. Held together by something stronger than vows. My children didn't need to be protected from the truth, they just needed someone who wouldn't flinch when it showed up. And that's what I became for them. Not just their dad. Their foundation. I don't know if I'll ever trust someone again the way I trusted her. I'm not rushing to find out. I have time. I have space. I have peace. And every day I wake up in this new life, I breathe a little easier knowing one thing. The people who love you right don't leave you asking questions. They show up. They stay true. They don't knock your life off its rails while pretending to hold your hand. And once you've seen the difference, you never settle for less again.